term. The term family literacy actually came to be sometime in the 80s, although I'm certain somebody strung those two words together previously. Taylor, 1983, just said that the practices, the literacy practices that parents have and the way that parents interact with their kids around literacy is very, very important in terms of children's literacy development. So it's that connection between adult and kids that is so critical to the family literacy piece. So kids who are exposed to print at home in many different ways. It doesn't have to be picture books, which is often what people think of when they think of, what are parents supposed to do? They're supposed to read to their kids. We know that it goes beyond that. So regardless of what literacy tasks a parent is engaging in, kids who are witness to that begin to understand that print holds meaning, that it represents language, and that it can be used to communicate with one another. We also know that home environments that have high levels of literacy do positively impact the academic achievement of kids, and that is across socioeconomic levels. And I think it's really important to understand when we talk about high levels of literacy that it doesn't have to be, or nor is it, simply picture book reading. So what I would like you to do, and maybe the best thing to do would to put these responses in the chat as well. What do you think prevents parents from becoming involved in their children's literacy development? What are those barriers in your mind or that you've seen firsthand? I just want to get some notions written down. Yeah, thank you, whoever said grandparents. And honestly, I really should just be saying family members, because we also know siblings are super influential in the literacy development of their siblings. A good story is a good story. Language barrier for sure. Time, books, they don't speak the language, jobs. A lot of people are saying time, education level, language. So I guess it matters if we're thinking about, is it literacy only in English? I mean, because what we do know is that if parents do not speak English or aren't fluent in English, that kids certainly have benefits from seeing their parents engage with literacy in their home language as well. So great, yeah, thanks. I think time, academic level, these are all things, access to books I saw, these are all things that I think are barriers, especially if we're thinking about literacy in a traditional sense. When I first started teaching first grade, it was my assumption that the very best way for parents to support their kids at home was to read to them. And as it turns out, it's not necessary. Wow, I'm getting massive sun right now. Let me try and shift. So it's not necessary that parents read to their kids. So access to books, while important, of course, isn't necessarily a barrier if we begin to expand our understanding of what does it mean to have a literate life at home. Let's see, there's more in here. Yes, someone even says I have students who can't read or write in their native language, and again, so it helps us to think about how do we expand, like pull back the lens of literacy even further, when we're dealing with parents who may not have the highest levels of literacy themselves in any language. All right. So here's some questions I want you to consider when you think about family literacy, or when we're working with our students to help them think about family literacy. So what do we do to understand the lives and literacy practices of our students and families outside of school? To what extent do we privilege academic literacy practices such as picture book read alouds over the home and community literacy practices of our students? I know you can read these questions. To what extent do we seek input from families and communities in designing literacy programs? And then finally, to what extent do we attempt to make literacy activities directly meaningful to the families that we work with? I'm sure if you know Eric, I know this is a question that always is in his mind as well when it comes to adult literacy students too. So those are some questions to think about that really come from the work of critical literacy, Paulo Freire, among others. And I'm not going to ask you to answer those questions just yet, just to start to think about that as we begin to expand our understanding of what it means, what family literacy can be. An important thing to consider is the notion of authenticity when it comes to literacy instruction. So when teachers such as yourselves, working with their students, are using, and children or adults are using real life texts for real life purposes, things that our students actually would use in their lives outside of a class. So examples, reading a supermarket flyer to see what's on sale, perhaps writing an advertisement to sell something, writing a letter, making a shopping list, reading a recipe to make cookies, reading a weather report just to see if you can go outside. I literally just had to cancel a gathering because it's supposed to rain all day tomorrow. Or writing a note to a child's teacher. So those are things that we have real purpose in life. They involve literacy. That is what we would think of as authentic literacy activities. So when we think about authentic, I think it's really important to know that what's authentic for me or what's authentic for you may not be a literacy practice that the families that you work with or the parents that you work with use. So that's worth thinking about, right? Writing a letter, for example, is a literacy activity that's taught in grade school. I know it's taught in some adult literacy classes as well. In this day and age, not very many people actually write letters anymore. So is that really an authentic literacy activity anymore? Is it an authentic literacy activity, for specific families? So it's worth thinking about. What's authentic for me may not be authentic. We need to really understand what's happening in the lives of our families so that the texts that we consider using in our classes actually reflect their lives. And Eric, you said if anybody has, lessons about writing checks too, Eric, exactly. I just don't even know if anyone does that anymore at all.
Right, okay. But as Sophie's sharing some of these ideas, chime in the chat, but also you can unmute if you want to chime in that way as well.
Yeah, okay, yeah, thanks, Eric, absolutely. It's actually a much larger group than I was even thinking would come on a Friday at 4, and I can't see all of you. So I am trying to keep an eye on the chat, and Eric's doing that as well, but just feel free to interrupt me.
New Jersey rules, 4:30 Friday night, we got 43 people here.
New Jersey does rule, that's amazing. Okay, so the research on this notion of authentic literacy instruction is pretty clear. When we use real life text for real life purposes, we actually see gains in achievement in reading and writing. So yay. Now let's think about what that looks like in literacy instruction. We think about the text. So the text that we use should be texts that exist in the lives of people outside of the literacy purpose. So we have the text, and then we have the purpose. So for reading and writing those texts, the purpose for reading and writing those texts are the same as they would be for someone outside of class. Going back to the letter writing thing, maybe writing a letter is an authentic task for some of our students, but if they're just practicing a letter to a fake person and the letter is never going to be sent, then that is not an authentic purpose for writing the letter. So we can think of it along those two lines. Is the text authentic, and is the purpose for doing it authentic? And also, is the audience, if we're doing writing, is the audience for that writing authentic? Are we doing it for real people? So you're probably familiar with things like this. Now I'm thinking from like a school teacher's lens. So school-only literacy, when you're talking about the children of the adults you might be working with, may look like this. It's texts that are written for the purpose of teaching literacy, like a basal reader, like a skill workbook, flashcards, those kinds of things. And the purpose is teaching and learning reading and writing skills. So, you complete it. The purpose is to complete an assignment, to show your knowledge, et cetera, to pass a test. That's our notion of school only literacy. Now, listen, these things serve a purpose. But to me, and this is like, this hits home more and more for me, the more I think about it. If we're, especially with the science of reading, which I won't talk about right now, but if we're only doing tasks in school that look like this, and we do not connect them to authentic purposes and authentic texts, then we are doing students, whether they're kids or adults, a disservice. So if you think about learning to read and write, and you think about something like this, I also want you to consider a classroom that, in addition to doing something like this, gives kids opportunities to learn literacy in an authentic way, such as having a play center set up where you've got food items and you can take orders from your classmates and you can serve them, right? So setting that sort of thing up, because think about the alphabetic knowledge, the phonemic awareness that is evident in this child's like waiter pad, server pad. All right, so I want you to consider too about literacy practices, that it's people interacting with the text for a lot of different reasons, and we can observe part of that practice. And each of these things you can see, this person's is using a phone to send a message. This person's writing in a notebook. These folks are reading a newspaper. We can see the practice, but we don't necessarily know anything about what's happening in terms of what kind of message is being sent. With these folks down here reading the newspaper, is this something they do often? What's important to them? None of those things are observable, right? So literacy goes beyond just text. It goes beyond what we can see folks doing. All right, so what does this all really mean? Thanks for bearing with me. I am trying to be mindful of time. If I'm going too fast, let me know. Basic reading skills are only part of being literate, and they're important, right? Phonics, word recognition, vocabulary comprehension. I'm sure some of your students need to learn those things, and their kids need to learn those things as well. But it also includes being able to engage in literacy practices. No, I'm not saying that right. It involves many types of knowledge as well. We need to know the cultural knowledge. We need to know the genre knowledge. So it's these things, but there's so much more to it, the part that we can't observe.
Sophie, maybe can go back a slide. Can you unpack the idea of genre knowledge a little bit? I think that might be.
Yeah, well, we're going to be looking more specifically at different kinds of genre, but like in terms of things like, if you think about literacy, there's text to inform, there are texts to direct, there are texts to, we think of genre as like fiction or nonfiction, but to expand that notion, we can think of, to-do lists. We can think of, communication, like sending a note to someone to let them, there's a lot. In fact, we're going to be looking at a lot of different examples, and there's going to be an activity for folks to actually unpack that a little bit more too.
Okay. There was already an example in the chat about writing a letter to the landlord for repairs, right? And I think that's a good example of that, right? That like, if you want a positive result from the landlord, you have to phrase it in a certain way to make sure that the landlord's actually going to do the repairs.
100%. That's a really, really good example. Such a good example. And that is exactly the kind of literacy I would love, and that is something too that kids can pick up on as well. That sort of real life literacy for real life purposes. Imagine a situation where a parent and child are living in a home and they're having problems with their plumbing, or they're having problems with leakage or something like that. And a parent can say, well, we better do something about that, sits next to the child or in front of the child, writes that letter to the landlord, maybe even thinks about the words that they're using, sends it, and then gets a result of some kind, hopefully. That is such an impactful way to, bring kids into the literacy process, because it shows that if you use a text for this purpose, to communicate, to request, or to do something like that, that you get a result. That's a real life use of literacy. It's a great example. Okay, So understanding genres, we can think about the purpose of genres. A dear friend, Kristen Perry, looked at the kinds of texts that kids bring home in their backpacks to parents, including things like permission slips. And she noted that, I don't know if you all have kids, Eric, I know you do. I'm sure some of you have experienced your child coming home, backpack filled with things. Even when you have a really hefty command of literacy and perhaps the English language, being able to make sense of all that stuff is something. But my colleague gave an example of a family who doesn't speak English well, and that they get all of these things. And so a permission slip, which is considered an important thing that a school might send home, is indistinguishable for some from all of the other stuff that comes home that may not be as important. So anyway, so understanding the purpose of a permission slip, that it actually requires filling out and sending back, is something that we take for granted that isn't always so obvious. How do we actually use a given text? Okay, so we get coupons in the mail. If you're not familiar with the coupon as a kind of genre, then it says 50 cents off, but what do you do with that? You know, maybe you cut them out, but then what? How do you get that money that they're offering? The genre knowledge also includes the features of a genre. So for example, filling out a resume is very, very specific, has very specific and required features. I love this example because think about the idea of a phone book these days. This is like one of those genres. If we teach our students this anymore, I don't know if anybody uses them anymore, but I like to keep this slide in this deck because, wow, it's kind of like a throwback to another time. Does anyone still use phone books out there?
Keep windows open, doors open. That's what we use phone books for.
Someone has their hand up. Does that mean that they do use phone books or that they have a question?
Yes, table leveling. There's lots of multiple uses for phone books. Yes.
It's really, really interesting. My kids really have no idea what they are. And then, you know, how do you use specific features? So our crossword puzzle is another example of an authentic literacy task, but there's a lot going on with this. Like, what do you do with this information? All right, so what I am going to do right now, and I've never done this in a virtual setting before, so I'm going to try and make it happen, is, and I'm going to, I'll go over this first and then I'll stop sharing. I'm going to put you, can I put people into breakout rooms or do you have to, Eric?
I can.
Okay, so I want breakout rooms of about 3 to 4. Okay. Don't do it yet though. I'm going to be giving you an everyday text genre. Now I have to give it to you virtually. So if you were in person, I'd actually give you text, some of you. And I'm going to ask you to think about these points. So for example, the first group and probably the 5th group, how many groups do you think we'll have, Eric?
How many items do you want discussed?
Well, I have 4 items, but I also have the capacity for, I mean, 2 groups can discuss the same item. You know what I mean?
Okay. Then yeah, why don't we do 8 groups? Okay,
8, perfect. Okay. So the text I'm going to be giving you, the first is a recipe. I think that's right. The second is the weather website. I don't know where you are, so I kind of honed in on Newark, New Jersey. Is that okay?
That's fine.
So some will be given a weather report. Some of the groups will be given a school field trip slip, and some of the groups will be given a school calendar. Okay, so you're going to be given these texts and you're going to be thinking about the literacy skills, the basic literacy skills, things like decoding and all that stuff that you're probably pretty familiar with, needed to make sense or to use the text. Any vocabulary, both generic and specialized, you'll see what I mean in a second because I'm going to give you a link to a form to fill out that's needed to be able to use this literacy genre. You're going to think about the purpose and the essential features of the text in front of you. You're going to think about how to explain how the text and features are used together, and then the overall knowledge and skills needed to engage in this literacy practice with this text. Finally, This is a big ask, I guess, because we don't have that much time. I'm going to ask you to discuss ways in which adults and children could use the text together. So in each of these things, I would say is a family literacy activity. So I want you to approach it that way. You're thinking about what would maybe your students that you work with, your adult students need to know, but then also in working with a child, what are the different literacy elements that are there? So let me see. I'm going to stop share. No, am I going to stop sharing? Or maybe I'll just shrink this for now.
So Sophie, you're going to send them a link to get to these texts?
I am.
Okay.
As soon as you know what, I'm just going to stop sharing because you'll see in just a second. I am sending you to a site. Hang on one second.
And what I'm going to do in the chat, I'm assigning what texts each group should look up.
Okay, so I would say, 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll look at 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, we'll look at the 1, 2, 3, 4s, if that makes any sense.
What I was thinking was, all right, what I was thinking was group 1 and 2 would do recipe, group 3 and 4 weather.
Okay, then I am going to change, if you give me 1 second, I'm going to just change that right now. 3, 4.
Right, so then group 5 and 6 is field trip. Group 7 and 8.
School calendar. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again, and then I'll put this link in the chat. And I hope this works. I worked really hard to make sure all my links worked and that I had shared the results and all of that good stuff. So I'm going to put the link in.
All right, so does everybody also see the link, the chat that I had put prior to Sophie's link, right? So when I create the rooms, you're going to end up in one of these 8 rooms, right? So, if you're in room 1 or 2, you're going to do the recipe. If you're group 3 or 4, you're going to do.
Hopefully this is relatively self-explanatory. You can see that for each group, I have a link to the text itself. That's the first link. And then I have a link to the worksheet to complete. Okay. Right. So for example, and then check me out. This is what I did because I thought I might have more people. Once you get there, you're going to need to make a copy for yourselves. And I would say only one person from the group needs to have this open to be able to share. So I'll let you figure that out. I think but everybody can look at the text itself. Let me show you exactly what I'm going to be asking you to do. And I am available to jump into rooms. So the first group is the recipe group. The first thing you're going to do is think of all the literacy skills that you would need to use to read the recipe. The vocabulary words that are generic to all recipes, special vocabulary words. What purpose does it serve in the world? Essential features of a recipe. How does someone use a recipe and its features to accomplish their goal? And then the final questions. What does someone need to know in order to make sense of this text? And then how could adults and children? So for the other ones, it's very, very similar, just changed to match the text. So let me think about that.
All right, everybody get that? So once you're in your room, which is the group, somebody in the group needs to download that, and then you can fill that out.
And you should still have access to the link once you leave, but it looks like a lot of you are already in there.
Okay.
If you have any questions, you know how to call for help in a Zoom room. Yep. Hopefully at least one person in the group. I'm happy to come pop in and give you, help you out if you need me.
Sophie, how many minutes you thinking?
Oh boy, I am thinking if you could do this in 15, does that seem reasonable?
Let's say 10.
Okay.
Let's say 10, and then there's some wiggle room.
Sounds good.
All right. All right. So I'm creating 8 rooms right now. And then the idea is we'll share out when everybody's done.
Yeah, we'll have a little bit of time for sharing, and then I just want to kind of close with some other ideas to share with you, and hopefully have a few moments for question and answer.
Okay. Are people joining the rooms? Okay. All right, so the rooms are open. Anybody not seeing an invite? All right. For the folks that are still on the main page. All right, Sue just joined, so I gotta, let's see, 65555. All right, I'll put Sue in room 8. All right, everybody get, Kathy, you get the invite. Mansh, you get the invite. Okay, so Sophie, do you wanna start with room 1 and I'll start with room 8 and then we'll just work our way towards room 4? Just
Perfect. Yeah, just to,
help
do you think that was clear enough? Yeah, I'll just make sure people
I
are
think
getting
so,
what
but
I'm
I
saying.
think by going in there, we can see.
All right, do I have access though? Can I do that? I wonder if you could make me a co-host or something and then I can pop in and out of rooms.
In and out. Okay, you're
Thank you.
able to jump in and out. All right, I'll start with room 8.
I'll start in 1.
Okay.
The link. And it becomes live. I happen to have the school calendar up. Did everyone find that? The school
Yes.
Calendar?
Yep, and then,
We're getting the resource first, Eric.
yes.
Okay, so
And
this
then
one,
whoever has it can share the screen. So
Oh.
then to be a scribe,
okay. Should I share a screen?
yeah, if you've got it.
Okay, so. Okay, so this is the school calendar. Is a how can I put this thing a little bit up?
All
Okay.
right.
And then the things you have to do.
Right. So there was the series of questions of thinking about
Yes.
how much you might use this, kind of
So
what
this-
are the literacy skills you need to have to work with this.
Yes, so
Yeah,
the
go ahead.
first thing we have here is a make a list of all of the literacy skills that you need to use to read the calendar. So we need a school calendar,
Mhm.
right? Should I write down the school calendar?
Right. And then think about specifically of the skills.
And then what else?
Vocabulary.
Well, one of the skills would be understanding color coding. Because the calendar is color coded.
Yes, so the colors, right? Color coding. You said? Color coding.
I'm wondering if I can see the calendar again because.
Yes, so the calendar is here. This is the calendar.
Okay, okay.
Let me minimize.
We're writing down. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to check in. You see, all right, so you got the calendar up. You have the worksheet, so you're thinking about the skills.
Yes, we got the
Yes,
calendar.
yeah.
All right. Everything's good.
Even the Eid, that's cultural, right?
Yeah.
Right. So holidays, right?
Yeah, and cultural.
And I'll just do split screen here.
All right, so I just wanted to check in. You got the field trip form?
Yeah, we got
Yes, we did. Yes.
now. I think it's just above this.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, it can't.
So here's the field trip form, and then here are the questions that we need to answer. I'll just put this full screen. So make a list of all the literacy skills that you need to use to read the sign up form. Well,
Well, a lot of it.
that's
And all that
Okay.
stuff.
Can
So
just
I mean,
check in?
based
You
on
got the
what
forms
what-
and the-
we're reading, I mean, obviously, you need like some literacy skills when it comes to computer tech, because there's a lot of like, if you have any questions, you can email somebody, no phone calls.
Yeah, so computer literacy is important.
Yeah.
Let me see.
And it has a lot of information that, and I think it depends the level
you know, like, okay, reporting it. I wonder, what, they didn't do that right from the beginning?
No,
Maybe when we joined, it turned off.
I
When
think
they
so,
did
yeah.
the breakout room.
Okay, so,
Oh, there's more.
What purpose
yeah.
does a website serve in the world?
Mm.
Oh,
radio station.
Yes. The
Radio station.
For the website though? Yeah, you think, or should that go somewhere else? Good point.
Parentheses optional.
That may be enough on the first one because there's several
Okay, we
more
don't-
parts to that form.
Correct. Correct. What kinds of special vocabulary words are generic?
Oh, you're muted.
My people need a little more time.
Okay.
How about yours? Are they almost done? Are they getting it?
Yeah, they're getting it. I just went through all the rooms to, see everybody found it, was doing it, right?
Yeah, I got maybe hung up. I haven't gone to 3 or 4 yet.
I breezed through them and made sure that they're had connected to the activity.
God
So,
bless you, Eric. Wow.
I
Talk
think-
about efficient.
yes. So yeah, let's give them a few more minutes.
Okay. The second group I went to was on like step 1.
Yeah. I just feel like with these things, like it always takes 5 to 10 minutes longer. So if we said 15 minutes, then it would be like 25
Oh,
minutes.
well, that is a really good point.
So
Yeah.
especially for me, like I'm notorious in the family. Like apparently, like there was some exchange between Aki and Teo recently where they were both home and I was cooking dinner. And Teo was like, when's dinner gonna be ready? And I said, I like 15 minutes. He went upstairs and Aki was like, when's dinner gonna be ready? And he said 15 minutes. And he was like, yeah, in real time or Issei time? And I was like, I'm cooking you dinner.
Right. I am probably the slowest chef, but my estimates are always really wrong.
Yes.
I had a hard time. I did a lot of teaching on Zoom, and I actually feel like I peaked sometime maybe fall. And I've been coming back down on the Zoom world ever since then. Like I've gotten worse at it again because I'm just so tired of it. How about you?
Since we're being recorded, I'm doing great. I'm sorry to hear, Sophie, that you're not doing as well in your professional life, and that's regrettable. Me, however, I feel like I'm continuing to flourish and get better as a teacher.
Well, the good news for me is that I'm no longer required to teach on Zoom. So I had to like relearn how to be in person. Like, oh, that's totally different.
I'll try to remember to cut this part out. But if not, Sophie's just kidding.
Oh, I see. I see. So you literally are sharing this with people.
Yes.
Well, I'm only reflecting on my practice.
Yes. I'm not sure anybody's going to listen to minute 43, but we'll see. If
If
you do, bully for you. If
Welcome.
somebody
Hello,
has gotten to
everybody.
this point, send me an email at angelmail@gmail.com. So you know you get to this point, and let me know that you got to the point where Sophie and I are talking about her Zoom skills.
It's like a little Easter egg.
Yes, it's a little Easter egg in that. So, all right. So I'll say 2 more minutes. I'll send out a broadcast message that says 2 more, because I am, I want to balance them doing it, but a chance to like report out.
Debrief on it. Yes, for sure. And I did want to like kind of end. Obviously, I won't be able to really talk about community literacy very much. I have pictures not from New Jersey. Where exactly? I mean, is it Montclair? Where are most of these folks from, or is it all over?
Everywhere in the state. That's the nice thing about being on Zoom for the conference, is that people are coming in from all over the state.
That is really cool.
You don't have to drive. And
I'm really impressed by how many folks are here. So how many people are registered for your conference?
215.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is that larger than usual? Is it more? Because
that's about the same. It's last year online was about 200, 215. In person, it was about 230 maybe, but in person there would be food, so
exactly.
But the drive, in person it was only 1 day, right? So now that we're online, it's really 4 days, right? Because the first day is plenary and awards. So that's kind of one session. And then yesterday and today, 5 different sessions. And then tomorrow, 2 sessions. So
nice.
It's been good. Yeah, it's been good turnout. All right, I'm going to give them 1 more minute.
So you're closing the rooms?
Yes.
Perfect.
I always forget on my own MSU thing, some of them are set up so that when you close it, it's 60 seconds after you close it. And some of them, it's like, that's it, immediate.
Oh.
It's very jarring.
It is. It's jarring, even if you give them a 1 minute warning.
Yes.
People are almost always like, bleh.
Yeah. It's like when you're on some of the groups, some like non-school like organizations that I'm part of, like we use like Google Hangouts because it's free. And there's like if it's the free one, there's no wiggle room. Like when it's at the end of the hour,
that's it.
Like, boom, that's it. And you're done.
Which I kind of appreciate.
Yeah, sometimes people are like, let's switch to a different platform. I was like, no, let's keep an hour meeting.
Absolutely. If you can't get it done in an hour, it's not worth it.
Yeah. We're doing something wrong. All right, so I'm going to close now. And then we'll bring people back. All right, it's immediate. Okay.
Hi, welcome back. I gave you a lot to do and think about actually in a pretty short amount of time, but I did want to spend some time debriefing. And I wanted to hear from, starting with groups 1 and 2, the recipe folks. Just a reflection on the literacy skills and understanding of literacy practices that can help guide the use of a recipe, and also any ideas for how that might work, you know, to engage a parent and child together. Anyone willing to share their thinking?
Yeah, any from either one of those two groups?
I'm sorry, we came in a second late. What was your question?
You
I'm
have the
sorry.
document,
So
Justin.
groups 1 and 2, the recipe folks, I just
Right.
want to, I would love for you to share out what you discovered from investigating that with regard to the literacy practices, the skills that are necessary to read a recipe.
Got it. We had quite a bit to say about this, but I think when you came in, Sophie, and you kind of asked us to zero in a little bit on the importance of like what's going to the dynamic between the parent and the child or whoever the family member is, and we kept coming back to, I think one of the biggest things that we were hitting on was the importance of being able to follow the sequence of something, that if you skip a step, the bottom line is not going to come out the way you necessarily are hoping that it's going to be, you know, and that you, the vocabulary was a huge thing also, you know, like there was generic, and then there were some very complicated things like parchment and colander and things that, you know, that may be a big vocabulary issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, I think I was trying to be, you know, regionally appropriate. So the recipe I picked for Trenton tomato pie might have been a little bit complicated, to be honest. But, you know, if you're working with, if you're thinking about working with younger kids, you could certainly find a recipe, even something like apple crisp or something that's a little bit less complicated than that one. But yeah, I love that you said the sequence of events is so important. And if you're thinking about kids and parents or grandparents or siblings, families working together, then it would be important for an adult too to be able to emphasize that with the child. Do you know what I mean? Like there's certain things that an adult brings their understanding of a recipe that if they're working together with the child, it would be important for them to highlight. All right, any other thoughts about the recipe?
We looked at vocabulary as well. We also talked about, depending on the age of the child, because if it was an older person, then, you know, that child or that person could help the parent. If, you know, they had low literacy, the parent could help. We looked at math. One of the things that we brought up was the importance of hygiene, you know, and talking about that before you go into the kitchen and start cooking. And then background knowledge in terms of, it said red pepper flakes. So talking about how to handle that so you don't put your hands in your eyes if you're, you know, working with a small child.
I think the mention of math makes me think about something that Linda said in her session earlier today, right? Which is that oftentimes adult learners have mathematical insight or mathematical strategies that may not be traditionally understood as like academic math, but are appropriate, right? And are productive, right? And we need to recognize and value those things. So we're not always thinking about adult learners from a deficit model, right? Which is they often get that message, right? So I think within the sphere of family literacy, this is a perfect opportunity for them to be like, oh, actually there's a number of things that I do know how to do, right? And working with recipes is one of them. And so I can model and work with my child. It's gonna, you know, sometimes I might learn vocabulary, but it's also going to increase my self-confidence and self-efficacy because here's something that I can do the same way that Linda was talking about, you know, people being able to solve real world math problems.
And you know what, Eric, to that end, again, that background knowledge, I'm thinking about the herbs that I grow. So that parent may say, you know what, let's try putting basil because in our culture or in our family, we use herbs. So why don't you go out and pick me some of that basil, and we're going to add that, even though it's not in the recipe, we're going to add that and talk about what it is, the spelling of it, and all of that.
I love that is such a great point. Exactly. I think, I mean, recipes, obviously, you may not be getting something off a website. It may be something that your grandmother wrote down and passed along to you. And it might say, you know, something like a handful of something. The measurement tools may not be precise. And then that's a really wonderful opportunity to actually bring in your own like background and culture too.
Exactly.
How much is a smidge? Yeah. Eric says basil's better than cilantro. That's hysterical.
They're all good.
Recurring motif. Yes, so great. Thank you, recipe folks. I know there's probably more you could say about just like all of the different things that are involved in reading recipe, but I do want to move into those folks that were looking at the weather report. So same question for you. What did you notice about the skills, the literacy practices that are necessary to read the weather report? And how might you encourage adults and children to look at that together?
Did you want us to share our screen at all to share?
Whatever you want to do.
Okay. I could briefly, and then, yeah, anyone in my group or the other, I think there are two groups, right? That work on it. So, yeah. Here's some of what we put in about literacy skills, math, reading, geography, and thinking about not just locally, but nationally, looking at globally, reading a chart, looking at that week-long chart where they show the weather, and that's definitely something you could do with your children. Reading the weather symbols, decoding abbreviated text that often it's it's shortened form, so understanding that technical language, and then phonetics, phonics, word recognition, comprehension. Yeah, something we didn't get too much in terms of the generic and websites, but a lot of vocabulary specific to weather and all those varying degrees of weather descriptions. But anyone feel free to jump in too. Yeah, a lot of people brought up the importance of the visuals on a weather website, the videos that pop up and pictures, and also being able to link to kind of family and other countries, seeing what's going on in terms of weather there.
I love that. Yeah, like what's the temperature where grandma is right now? Yeah, I think that's such a fun thing to do.
Yeah, and then reading the text, planning activities. Maybe this is later down what we were saying, like looking at a weather prediction and then having your child like pick out what clothes they're going to wear, based on the weather, like that. Translation.
Looking at your vocabulary list reminds me, one of the things that I do with my own students, right, my ESL students, is thinking about what's the most appropriate translation, right? So cool, cold, chilly, and brisk, right? So how you experience chilly versus how you experience brisk, right? These are really subtle nuances of language, right? And so then how do you translate that into Spanish or Arabic or Farsi or whatever language you speak, right? And not everybody's necessarily going to agree, right? That, okay, well, chili in Arabic sounds like this. No. Chili for Arabic and chili would be this, so that's sort of like, discussion around translation is really, really helpful for students' language development and conversation.
It's a really good point. I mean, when you think about looking at the weather, it might be something that, again, I don't know if it's an authentic literacy task for all students, right? Some people may not look at the weather online, but for a lot of people they do, and they wouldn't necessarily think about involving their children in that process. So it's like that extra step of taking something that you do anyway, that around literacy, like looking at the weather to decide if you're going to need to bring your umbrella or not, and involving kids in it too. Look at all that we can see here, So did the other group have anything to add that wasn't already on that document?
I just wanted to say too, it's so regional. I'm actually in California, so I'm experiencing different weather. So understanding that that's going to change based on where you are and the terms that you hear.
Definitely, 100%. Okay. Well, so should we move on to that school field trip form groups?
Yeah, I think so. Field trip. Anybody in the field trip want to comment?
I can comment. So what we found out was that for the most part, you need not only just like reading literacy, but also just knowing the more complicated words. So a few of the harder words that we saw on the form were like indemnify, release, hold harmless, discharged. And that might be a little bit difficult for some people, even just, English language people that has been speaking it forever. But also when it came to how you can incorporate that together as a family or in a community setting, I related and somebody else in my team related on how, sometimes if parents don't know necessarily all of the terminology in a form, a lot of times their children will say, oh, this is what this and that means. And maybe it's not like a perfect translation. A lot of times it might be just kind of summarized, but it kind of gets parents used to what forms look like. and maybe prepares them a little bit for the next time, because these forms are probably going to happen often, especially if, you know, they go to public schools and they're going on trips all the time. But that's kind of what we talked about. And I don't know if somebody else in my team wants to jump in, but yeah.
Alicia, I also just want to add, like, when everything that you just said was great. Think about that field trip slip. And if you are, I don't know, any parent really, indemnify, really? I mean,
yeah, that's what we said. We're like, these
Yeah,
words
we
are a
talked
little-
about like
Right?
just English speaking people would be like, wait, let me get my dictionary.com out. Like some the other woman that participated said this sounds like legal terminology.
yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, something that schools should be thinking about is writing forms that are going home to parents in language that they can understand. There may be a legal indemnity issue at play there, but think about how many parents might look at that and not really know what even to do with it. It gives one pause just to think about that.
I mean, there are still people who are very engaged in advocating for plain language documents, right? So that government forms and official forms be presented and produced in plain language, so that if you do have to have indemnify in there for whatever legal reason, that you would have some sort of descriptor after that, so people know exactly what indemnify means, right? So that, like, making the texts more user friendly.
And not only that, but also just thinking about if you're sending this form home and children might be translating it for their parents, maybe make it, you know, easy enough for at least a child to be able to translate it in an easier way. So it's not even just for adults to make it easier for adults, but the children themselves, like why do they have to translate indemnify if that's what they're going to be doing? But
right.
Yeah, this is a great idea.
We know that children are often linguistic and cultural brokers for their parents, right? But it's one thing for a child to explain, you know, we've got a back to school night on Wednesday, you know, can you come in and talk to my teachers? And another thing to say, sign this form so that, you know, you indemnify the school.
Eric, it looks like we're out of time. I just wonder if we could just take 1 minute to hear from the last groups in terms of the school calendar, real quickly.
Real fast. There were so many things on the calendar that we found you could make like a 2-3 week lesson of. In addition to what everyone said about the vocabulary words, like what is a reorganization? Also, you could talk about the holiday. What is Id? I don't know that. Maybe, you know, did you learn about that in school? Tell me about it. Is it similar to what we celebrate? Is it a different religion? That could engender some discussion. Also, we talked about computer literacy. You have to be able to get on the website. You have to know the difference between the district and the school. What's the difference? There's just so many things. We also found a lot of the links at the bottom of the calendar very helpful. There's summer program and reading lists. So we were thinking that if you pick a book, maybe the child and parent, if it's an easy enough book, can maybe, you know, read it together over the summer, have a little book club, things like that. So there's just so many things that we found that you could do. You know, talk about the music concert, also the acronyms. What do all the acronyms mean? NJ, B, whatever. So just so many things you can create a lesson up from that. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you spoke so quickly. I really appreciate that. It is time to go. And I'm sorry, because I could go on and on about this for a long time, but what I want to leave you with is just hoping that you'll think about family literacy now from a more expansive understanding. Like, what are those literacy practices that are taking place at home anyway, that parents are involved in? So when we're thinking about time, you know, sometimes you do want to look at the weather report really fast, but if you have a few extra minutes, bringing your child over, because it is that experience of attaching print, you know, the meaning of print that will really, really help students when they get to school or if they're already in school. So I guess that's my close for you, but thank you so much for engaging in this on a Friday afternoon. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Sophie, to just underline that again, right, to go back to my earlier point, this is a way of getting adult learners to recognize what they're already doing as parents, right? And to not feel bad about themselves if they're not doing the types of middle class, you know, parenting that they see in the media, right? They're still engaged. They still care about their kids. They still care about their kids' education, right? They're still involved, right? And we can show them some of the ways that they are, and they may not even think about it, right? So I will be sending out the PDF of the slide of the PowerPoint. I've just dropped the link in again for those of you that want the PD certificate. And then the recording of this will be up on the YouTube channel probably within like a week or so. And I do want to thank you again for sticking around until Friday at 5 o'clock. Many of you have been to a lot of sessions the last couple of days. So thanks for your contributions to each one of the sessions. They only work, right, because it's interactive and people participate.